The gunshots echoed across the valley as Aurora James ducked behind the wagon, her heart pounding against her chest like a drummer gone mad. It was 1878 in Central City, Colorado, and she had just witnessed her father's murder by the notorious Blackwell gang. They'd come for the land deed, the precious paper that proved the James family owned the most valuable silver mining claim in the territory. As the bandits thundered away, Aurora clutched the document hidden in her boot, vowing that her father's death would not be in vain. 3 months later, Aurora sat rigidly in the Central City Bank, across from Mr. Peterson, the balding bank manager who peered at her over wire-rimmed spectacles. "Miss James, I understand your predicament, but the bank cannot extend a loan to a woman for mining operations. It's simply not done." His voice was not unkind, merely matter-of-fact, which somehow made it worse. "My father built that mine from nothing," Aurora replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I know every tunnel, every vein. The Silver Queen has the richest deposit in the territory." "That may be, but I'm a woman," she finished for him. "Tell me, Mr. Peterson, does silver care who digs it out of the ground?" the banker sighed, closing the ledger before him. "Society has rules, Miss James. Without a husband or male business partner, I cannot approve this loan." "I'm sorry." Aurora stood, smoothing down her simple blue dress. At 22, she was unmarried and alone in the world, but she was far from helpless. "Then I'll find another way." Outside the bank, Central City bustled with activity. Miners, merchants, and ladies in fine dresses moved along the boardwalks while wagons rumbled down the dusty Main Street. The town had grown considerably since silver had been discovered in the surrounding mountains, transforming it from a tiny settlement to a thriving mining community. Aurora made her way to the Silver Dollar Saloon, ignoring the sideways glances from passers-by. A respectable woman had no business entering such an establishment, but she was beyond caring about appearances. She needed men to work the mine, and she knew exactly where to find them. The saloon fell momentarily quiet as she pushed through the batwing doors. The smell of whiskey, tobacco, and unwashed bodies assaulted her senses. Men turned to stare, some with curiosity, others with something more predatory in their eyes. "Well, look what just wandered in," drawled a voice from the bar. "You lost, little lady." Aurora ignored the comment and scanned the room. Her gaze landed on a table in the corner where 4 men were playing cards. She recognized them as experienced miners who had worked for her father. Taking a deep breath, she approached them. "Mr. Daniels," she addressed the oldest of the group, a gray, bearded man with calloused hands. "I'd like to speak with you and your companions about a business proposition." Daniels looked up from his cards, surprise evident on his weathered face. "Miss James, this ain't no place for a lady like yourself." "I'm not here as a lady," Aurora replied firmly. "I'm here as the owner of the Silver Queen mine." This announcement was met with uncomfortable glances among the men. Finally, Daniels cleared his throat. "Miss Aurora, we all were mighty sorry about your pa. He was a good man." "Thank you. And as his daughter, I intend to continue his work. I need experienced miners, and I'm prepared to offer the same wages my father did, plus a percentage of any new strikes." The men exchanged looks, and Aurora saw the hesitation in their eyes. Finally, one of them, a younger man named Frank, spoke up. "Madam, it ain't that we don't respect your father's memory, but, well, a mine ain't no place for a woman to be in charge." "They'll never respect me," she said, more to herself than to the men, her voice barely audible over the saloon noise. "They will when they see you ride beside me," came a deep voice from behind her. Aurora turned to find herself looking up at a tall man leaning against a nearby post. His face was partially shadowed by a well-worn Stetson, but she could see intense eyes studying her. His clothes were dusty from the trail buckskin jacket, denim pants, and scuffed boots that had seen many miles. A gun belt hung low on his hips, the holster tied down in the manner of someone who knew how to use it. "And who might you be?" she asked, straightening her spine. He pushed his hat back slightly, revealing a strong, featured face with several days' worth of beard. "Garrett Hayes. I heard you're looking for miners. I need men who take orders from whoever signs their pay, regardless of whether they're wearing trousers or skirts," Aurora replied pointedly. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I've worked everything from California to the Black Hills. Don't much care who's giving orders, long as they're the right ones and the pay comes regular." Aurora studied him. There was something different about this man compared to the others in the saloon. A steadiness in his gaze, perhaps, or the way he stood confident but not cocky. "Do you have mining experience, Mr. Hayes?" 8 years. Started in '70 after the war. Worked silver in Nevada, gold in Dakota. One of the card players snorted. "This ain't about mining. Hayes here's just sweet on the idea of working for a pretty face." The cowboy didn't react to the taunt, keeping his eyes on Aurora. "I know silver when I see it. I know men, too. I can help you put together a crew that cares more about what's in the ground than who's giving orders." Aurora considered his offer. She needed help, not just miners, but someone who could command respect from rough men. Yet trusting a stranger was risky. "Why would you help me, Mr. Hayes?" "I need work," he answered simply. "And I've got no patience for men who judge by appearance rather than ability. Seen too much of that." Before Aurora could respond, the saloon doors swung open, and a hush fell over the room. 3 men entered, their spurs jingling with each deliberate step. Aurora's blood ran cold as she recognized Victor Blackwell, the leader of the gang that had murdered her father. Blackwell scanned the room, his cold eyes eventually finding Aurora. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. "Well, if it isn't the James girl. Still playing at being a mine owner, I see." Aurora felt her hands begin to tremble, but she clenched them into fists at her sides. "What do you want, Blackwell?" "Just being neighborly," he replied, his voice deceptively pleasant. "After all, I'll be taking over that mine of yours soon enough. Thought I'd offer you a fair price before things get difficult." Garrett Hayes shifted his position subtly, moving closer to Aurora. She noticed his hand now rested casually near his holster. "The Silver Queen isn't for sale," Aurora declared, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Not to you, not to anyone." Blackwell's smile faded. "Your father was stubborn too. Look where that got him." The tension in the saloon was palpable. Even the piano player had stopped, leaving the room in uncomfortable silence. "You should consider my offer carefully, Miss James," Blackwell continued. "A young woman alone can face many accidents in mining country." "She's not alone," Garrett said quietly, his voice carrying in the silent room. Blackwell's attention shifted to the cowboy, assessing him with narrowed eyes. "This doesn't concern you, stranger." "I'm making it my concern," Garrett replied evenly. For a long moment, the 2 men stared at each other, the air between them charged with potential violence. Then Blackwell laughed, breaking the tension. Well, the little lady found herself a guard dog." He looked back at Aurora, all pretense of pleasantry gone. "It won't help. That mine will be mine one way or another." With that, Blackwell and his men backed toward the door. "Enjoy your evening, Miss James. Our business can wait. For now." After they left, the saloon gradually returned to its normal buzz of conversation and clinking glasses. Aurora realized she had been holding her breath and exhaled slowly. "You've made a dangerous enemy," Garrett observed quietly. "He was already my enemy," Aurora replied, her voice bitter. "He killed my father for the mine." Garrett's expression hardened. Can you prove it? Not enough for the law to act, she admitted. Sheriff Miller says there's no evidence, just my word against Blackwell's. That's often how it goes, Garrett said, and something in his tone suggested personal experience. Aurora looked at the miners still seated at the card table, their expressions uncomfortable. She knew she'd get no help there. Mr. Hayes, she said, turning back to the cowboy. If you were serious about your offer, I'd like to discuss terms. I need to get the mine operational within 2 weeks before I lose the right to the claim. Garrett nodded. I'm serious. When would you like to start? Tomorrow at dawn, Aurora said decisively. Meet me at the mining office, and we'll ride to the Silver Queen. As Aurora left the saloon, she felt a mixture of hope and trepidation. Trusting this stranger was a risk, but she had few options left. And something about Garrett Hayes gave her a confidence she hadn't felt since her father died. Perhaps with his help, she could save her father's legacy and get justice for his murder. The next morning arrived with a golden sunrise that painted the mountains in amber light. Aurora had barely slept, her mind racing with plans and worries. She dressed in practical clothing, a split riding skirt her father had reluctantly commissioned for her, a sturdy blouse, and leather boots. Her long chestnut hair was braided and pinned up under a wide-brimmed hat to keep the sun off her face. At the mining office, a modest wooden building on the edge of town, Aurora organized the paperwork she needed. The claim was still valid, but without active mining, it would revert to public domain in just 14 days. She was reviewing the boundaries when she heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching. Garrett Hayes dismounted from a magnificent chestnut gelding. In the morning light, Aurora could see him more clearly than in the dim saloon. He was older than she'd first thought, perhaps in his early 30s, with lines around his eyes that spoke of years squinting in the sun. His hair was dark brown with hints of gray at the temples, and his eyes were a striking green that reminded her of the pine forests higher in the mountains. "Miss James," he greeted, touching the brim of his hat. "Mr. Hayes," she returned with a nod. "I appreciate your punctuality." "Old Army habit," he replied. "Hard to break." Aurora led her own horse, a dappled gray mare named Willow, from the small stable behind the office. "It's about an hour's ride to the Silver Queen. I hope you're prepared for what you'll find there." "What should I expect?" Garrett asked as he checked his saddle cinch. "Neglect," Aurora said bluntly. "After my father died, the men abandoned the operation. Some equipment may have been stolen, and Blackwell's men might have sabotaged the main shaft." Garrett mounted his horse in one fluid motion that spoke of years in the saddle. "Then we'd best get moving. Daylight's burning." They rode side by side out of town, drawing curious stares from early risers. Aurora was acutely aware of how they must look a woman dressed like a man, riding alongside a dusty cowboy. She lifted her chin, refusing to show any sign that the disapproving glances affected her. Once they cleared the town limits, the trail began to climb into the mountains. The terrain grew steeper, winding through stands of aspen and pine. Aurora found herself studying her companion as they rode. He sat his horse with the easy confidence of someone who'd spent most of his life in the saddle, and his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, alert for any sign of danger. "You mentioned you fought in the war," Aurora said, breaking the companionable silence. "Which side?" "Union," he replied shortly. 79th New York Infantry, joined up in '63 when I was 18. "You're from New York then," he shook his head. "Pennsylvania originally. After the war, I couldn't settle back down to farm life, headed west like a lot of restless young men." "And you've been wandering ever since?" Aurora asked, more or less. "Tried my hand at different things. Drove cattle, worked mines, scouted for the army for a while." He glanced over at her, What about you? Have you always lived in Colorado? No, Aurora replied. My father and I came here from St. Louis 5 years ago after my mother died. He heard about the silver strikes and was determined to make his fortune. She smiled sadly. He was always chasing the next big opportunity, but the Silver Queen was different. He truly believed in it. Was he right? Garrett asked. About the silver. Yes, we hit a rich vein just 3 months before he was killed. Her voice hardened. That's why Blackwell wants the claim. My father refused to sell, so they murdered him and tried to steal the deed. But you have it, Aurora nodded. I was there that day, hidden in the mine office, when I heard the shots. She paused, the memory still raw. I grabbed the deed before they could find it, then fled into the mountains. By the time I made it back to town the next day, Blackwell had already told everyone my father had been killed by Ute raiders. Garrett's expression darkened. Convenient story. Sheriff Miller believed it or pretended to. Aurora's tone was bitter. Without witnesses, there was nothing to prove Blackwell was involved. They rode in silence for a while, each lost in thought. Eventually, the trail widened as they approached a clearing in the forest. Beyond it, Aurora could see the wooden structures of the Silver Queen mine perched on the mountainside. There it is, she said, pointing to the collection of buildings. The main shaft entrance was visible, its timber frame standing dark against the mountainside. Several smaller structures surrounded it: a bunkhouse, an office, a tool shed, and a stable. As they rode closer, the extent of the neglect became apparent. The buildings looked abandoned, with broken windows and doors hanging askew. Equipment lay scattered about, rusting in the elements. It's worse than I expected, Aurora admitted as they dismounted near the mine entrance. Garrett surveyed the scene with a critical eye. Seen worse. Structure looks sound at least. They secured their horses and began a thorough inspection of the property. The mine office had been ransacked, with papers strewn everywhere and furniture overturned. The bunkhouse was in similar disarray, though the basic amenities remained intact. Most concerning was the condition of the mine entrance itself. Someone's deliberately damaged the support timbers, Garrett observed, examining the main shaft entrance. It's unstable. We'll need to reinforce this before anyone goes inside. Aurora felt a wave of despair. We don't have time for major repairs. The claim expires in 2 weeks if we're not actively mining. Garrett studied the damage more carefully. We can make it safe enough to start preliminary work, but we'll need lumber, tools, and men willing to work. The lumber mill is still in my father's name, Aurora said. They'll extend credit. As for tools, whatever wasn't stolen should be in the shed. They found the tool shed relatively intact, with enough picks, shovels, and other equipment to begin work. As they continued their inspection, Aurora outlined her plan. If we can extract even a modest amount of silver ore in the next 2 weeks, it will be enough to prove the claim is active. Then I can use that as collateral for a bank loan to hire a full crew and properly develop the mine. Sound strategy, Garrett agreed, but Blackwell won't make it easy. He clearly wants this claim badly enough to kill for it. Aurora's jaw tightened. I won't let him take what my father built. They worked until sunset, clearing debris and taking inventory of what they had and what they needed. As dusk fell, they sat on the porch of the mine office, sharing a simple meal of jerky, bread, and coffee that Garrett had brought in his saddlebags. We should head back to town, Aurora said reluctantly, watching the shadows lengthen across the clearing. It's not safe to stay here overnight yet. Garrett nodded. Tomorrow I'll help you recruit some men. There must be a few miners in Central City with more sense than prejudice. And if there aren't? Aurora asked quietly. Garrett took a sip of his coffee before responding. Then we start with what we have, you and me. Sometimes that's enough to begin changing minds. Aurora studied him in the fading light. Why are you really helping me, Mr. Hayes? And don't say it's just for the work. He was silent for a long moment, staring into the distance. Let's just say I understand what it's like to be judged unfairly, he finally said. To have people look at you and decide what you're worth based on what they see, not who you are. There was something in his voice that hinted at old pain. Aurora wanted to ask more, but sensed he wouldn't welcome further questions. Well, whatever your reasons, she said instead, I'm grateful for your help. As they rode back to Central City in the gathering darkness, Aurora felt the first stirrings of hope since her father's death. With Garrett Hayes at her side, perhaps she had a fighting chance after all. The next morning, Aurora awoke with renewed determination. She dressed quickly in her practical attire and headed to the general store, where she arranged for supplies to be delivered to the mine. The shopkeeper, Mr. Thornton, had known her father and seemed sympathetic to her situation, though he clearly thought her mining venture was foolish. Your pa would want you to sell that claim and head back east to family, he advised as he tallied her order. Mining's no life for a young lady. I have no family back east, Mr. Thornton, Aurora replied evenly. And my father would want me to finish what he started. The bell above the door jingled and Garrett entered, nodding politely to Aurora and the shopkeeper. Miss James, I've found 3 men willing to work. They're waiting at the livery. Aurora felt a surge of surprise and relief. Already, that's wonderful news. Mr. Thornton looked between them with undisguised curiosity. You're working for Miss James, Hayes? I am, Garrett confirmed without elaboration. The shopkeeper shook his head. Well, I never. Times surely are changing. After settling her account, Aurora followed Garrett to the livery stable where 3 rough-looking men were waiting. None were familiar to her, which was both concerning and a relief. They weren't local men who might harbor prejudice against her, but they were also unknown quantities. Miss James, this is Miguel Ortiz. Garrett introduced a wiry Hispanic man with intelligent eyes. Best timberman I've worked with. Those support beams will be solid as bedrock when he's done. Ortiz touched his hat respectfully. Señorita. And these are the Johnson brothers, Paul and Samuel, Garrett continued, indicating 2 broad-shouldered men who looked enough alike to be twins. They worked the Comstock lode for 5 years, no silver mining inside and out. The brothers nodded, their expressions neutral but not unfriendly. Gentlemen, Aurora acknowledged them, I appreciate your willingness to work at the Silver Queen. Mr. Hayes has no doubt told you our situation. We need to get the mine operational within 2 weeks. The pay is standard wages, plus a percentage of any new strikes. Hayes said you're the boss, Samuel Johnson stated, his tone making it half a question. I am, Aurora confirmed, meeting his gaze steadily. I'll be working alongside you, and I expect to be treated with the same respect you'd show any mine owner. In return, I promise fair treatment and prompt payment. The men exchanged glances, and Aurora braced herself for rejection. But to her surprise, Paul Johnson simply shrugged and said, Sounds fair enough. When do we start? Right now, Aurora replied, unable to keep the relief from her voice. The wagon with supplies will follow us up. Within the hour, they were on the trail to the Silver Queen, the men riding their own horses while Aurora and Garrett led the way. It was a clear, crisp day, with a breeze carrying the scent of pine from the higher elevations. How did you find them so quickly? Aurora asked Garrett when they were far enough ahead not to be overheard. Ortiz was easy. We worked together in Nevada years ago. Good man in a tight spot. The Johnson brothers I met at the boarding house last night. They're new in town, looking for work, and don't much care who signs their pay as long as the money's good. And you trust them? Garrett considered this. As much as I trust most men I've just met. They're experienced miners with no obvious connection to Blackwell. That's a start. When they arrived at the mine, everyone dismounted and surveyed the work ahead. Garrett quickly organized the men, sending Ortiz to assess the damaged support timbers while the Johnson brothers cleared debris from the entrance. Aurora set about restoring order to the mine office, where the claim documents and survey maps were kept. By midday, the wagon with supplies arrived, and work began in earnest. Ortiz proved his worth immediately, directing the reinforcement of the mine entrance with the expertise of a master craftsman. The Johnson brothers worked steadily, clearing rock falls and examining the track for the ore carts. Aurora split her time between physical labor and administrative tasks, determined to prove she wasn't afraid of hard work. She helped carry lumber, organize tools, and began reconstructing the mining ledgers that had been scattered during the ransacking. Late in the afternoon, Garrett found her in the mine office, poring over a map of the tunnels. "The men are making good progress," he reported. "Ortiz thinks we can begin limited exploration of the main tunnel by tomorrow afternoon." Aurora looked up from her work, pushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "That's encouraging. Have you had any issues with them?" "Taking orders from a woman? Not so far," Garrett replied. "They're professionals. As long as you know what you're talking about when it comes to mining, they'll respect you." Aurora gestured to the map before her. "This is where my father was focusing his efforts before he died. He called it the heart, a chamber where several veins intersect. The silver content is exceptionally high." Garrett studied the map, his shoulder nearly touching hers as he leaned in. Aurora was suddenly very aware of his proximity, of the clean masculine scent of him beneath the day's dust and sweat. She found herself noticing details, the way his hands, though calloused from hard work, moved with unexpected grace over the map. The fine lines at the corners of his eyes that deepened when he concentrated. "If the ore's as rich as you say," he said, oblivious to her scrutiny, "it's no wonder Blackwell wants the claim. A vein like this could be worth a fortune." Aurora pulled herself back to the matter at hand. "Yes, which is why we need to establish legal operation as quickly as possible. Once we've processed enough ore to prove the claim is active, Blackwell will have a much harder time stealing it." Garrett straightened, putting a respectful distance between them again. "We should establish a guard rotation tonight. I don't trust Blackwell to leave us alone for long." "You think he'd attack directly?" Aurora asked, concerned. "Not yet, but sabotage, intimidation, those are likely." He met her eyes directly. "Where are you staying tonight?" The question caught Aurora off guard. I hadn't thought that far ahead. I suppose I should return to town." Garrett shook his head. "Too dangerous to ride back and forth each day. Blackwell could easily ambush you on the trail." He considered for a moment. "The bunkhouse has separate quarters for a foreman. They're small but private. You could stay there." Aurora hesitated. Staying overnight at the mine with 4 men would be scandalous by any measure. But Garrett was right, daily travel posed significant risks. "What about my reputation?" she asked, then almost laughed at how trivial the concern seemed compared to everything else she faced. Garrett's expression softened slightly. "Miss James, I think that ship sailed the moment you decided to run a mine in trousers." This time Aurora did laugh, the sound surprising even herself. "I suppose you're right, Mr. Hayes." As the sun began to set, the men established a makeshift camp. The bunkhouse wasn't yet habitable, so they cleared space in the mine office for sleeping. Ortiz proved to be an excellent cook, preparing a hearty meal of beans, salt pork, and biscuits over an open fire. As they ate, Aurora studied her unlikely crew in the firelight. Ortiz was telling a story about a mine collapse in Nevada that he'd narrowly escaped, his hands animated as he spoke. The Johnson brothers listened attentively, occasionally interjecting with questions or comments. Garrett sat slightly apart, his rifle across his knees, eyes scanning the darkness beyond their circle of light. "So, Señorita James," Ortiz said when he'd finished his tale, "how did you learn about mining? Most women, they are not interested in such things." "My father taught me," Aurora replied. "At first, he just wanted me to understand the business side, the ledgers, the assay reports, but I was curious about all of it. Eventually, he started bringing me to the mine itself." She smiled at the memory. "He said I had a better eye for silver than most men he'd worked with." "That is a rare gift," Ortiz nodded appreciatively. Samuel Johnson spoke up. "No disrespect, madam, but aren't you afraid? Mining's dangerous work, even without folks like Blackwell causing trouble." Aurora considered the question seriously. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "But fear doesn't change what needs to be done." She looked around at the men. "My father used to say courage isn't about not being scared, it's about doing what's right despite being scared." Paul Johnson raised his tin cup in a small salute. "Your father sounds like a wise man." "He was," Aurora agreed softly. "And I intend to honor his memory by making the Silver Queen everything he believed it could be." After the meal, they established a watch schedule. Garrett took the first shift, the Johnson brothers would split the middle hours, and Ortiz would take the pre-dawn watch. Aurora insisted on being included in the rotation, but Garrett firmly refused. "You need to rest," he told her. "Tomorrow will be another long day." Though she wanted to argue, Aurora recognized the sense in his words. She retired to the foreman's quarters, which Garrett and the men had hastily cleaned and prepared for her. The small room contained only a narrow cot, a rough table with a lantern, and pegs on the wall for clothing. But after the day's labor, even this sparse accommodation seemed luxurious. As she settled onto the cot, Aurora could hear the men's low voices outside her door. Their presence was oddly comforting. For the first time since her father's death, she wasn't completely alone in her struggle. She extinguished the lantern and lay in the darkness, listening to the night sounds of the mountain, the distant cry of a coyote, the soft whisper of wind in the pines, the occasional creak of timber as the mine settled. Despite her exhaustion, sleep was elusive. Her mind raced with plans, concerns, and increasingly, thoughts of Garrett Hayes. There was something about him that intrigued her, a depth beneath his quiet exterior that suggested a complex history. He treated her with respect but not deference, acknowledging her authority while offering his expertise freely. It was a balance few men seemed capable of achieving in her experience. Eventually, fatigue overtook her racing thoughts, and Aurora drifted into sleep, dreaming of silver veins running like rivers through dark stone, and of green eyes watching over her from the shadows. Morning arrived with the sound of hammering. Aurora woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was until the events of the previous day came flooding back. She dressed quickly and stepped outside to find activity already in full swing. Ortiz and the Johnson brothers were reinforcing the mine entrance, their movements efficient and coordinated. Of Garrett, there was no immediate sign. "Good morning," she called to the men. They paused in their work to acknowledge her, Paul Johnson touching his hat. "Morning, Miss James. Coffee's hot by the fire if you're wanting some." Aurora thanked him and moved to the small campfire where a pot of coffee sat on a flat stone near the coals. As she poured herself a cup, she glanced around the clearing. "Where's Mr. Hayes?" Samuel Johnson jerked his head toward the forest. "When hunting at first light, said we could use fresh meat." As if summoned by his name, Garrett emerged from the tree line, a brace of rabbits hanging from his belt. He nodded to Aurora as he approached. "Thought these might improve breakfast," he said, holding up his catch. Within half an hour, the rabbits were skinned and roasting over the fire. The aroma made Aurora realize how hungry she was after the previous day's exertion. They ate quickly, eager to begin the day's work. After breakfast, Garrett organized the day's tasks. The Johnson brothers would continue clearing the main tunnel, while Ortiz finished reinforcing the entrance. Aurora would update the mine records and prepare the office for proper operation. Garrett himself would ride to town to check on additional supplies and gather intelligence about Blackwell's activities. "Be careful," Aurora told him as he prepared to depart. "Blackwell has eyes everywhere in town." "I'll be discreet," he assured her. "Lock the office door while I'm gone and keep your father's revolver close." After Garrett rode out, Aurora settled into the mine office to work. The room was looking more orderly now, with the scattered papers collected and organized. She began reconstructing the mining ledgers, recording the equipment inventory and planning for ore processing. Mid-morning, a shout from outside interrupted her work. Aurora grabbed the Remington revolver her father had taught her to use and hurried to the door. Samuel Johnson was striding across the clearing, excitement evident in his face. "Miss James, you need to see this." Tucking the revolver into the pocket of her skirt, Aurora followed him to the mine entrance, where Paul and Ortiz were examining something in the ore cart they just pushed out. "We've reached the main tunnel," Paul explained as she approached. "Cleared enough debris to get about 50 yards in. Found this just where your map showed a side vein should be." He held out a chunk of rock for her inspection. Aurora took it, turning it in the sunlight. The gray stone was shot through with distinctive dark threads that gleamed metallically. "Silver sulfide," she breathed, excitement rising within her. "High-grade ore." "There's more where that came from," Samuel added. "The vein looks strong." "If it continues as it appears, you've got a rich deposit here." Aurora felt a surge of vindication. This was proof her father had been right about the Silver Queen, proof that her struggle wasn't in vain. "Can we get to the heart the chamber my father was developing before he died?" she asked. Ortiz shook his head. "Not yet, señorita. There is a collapse about 60 yards in that must be cleared. It will take at least 2 days of careful work. But this is enough to establish active mining operations," Paul pointed out. "We can start processing small batches of ore immediately to prove the claim is being worked." Aurora nodded, already thinking ahead. "We'll need to get the crusher operational again, and we'll need mercury for the amalgamation process." The men looked impressed by her knowledge of mining techniques. Samuel nodded approvingly. "We can have the crusher working by tomorrow if all the parts are still here." They spent the rest of the morning extracting more ore and examining the equipment needed for processing. Aurora found herself working alongside the men, her sleeves rolled up as she helped clear debris and inspect machinery. To her surprise, they accepted her presence without comment, treating her as they would any mine owner who wasn't afraid to get their hands dirty. By early afternoon, they had accumulated a promising pile of silver-bearing ore and had determined that the crusher could be repaired with parts they already had on hand. The mood was optimistic as they took a brief break for a meal of leftover rabbit and biscuits. It was during this lull that they heard the approach of horses, multiple riders coming fast up the trail. "Get inside," Samuel ordered Aurora, reaching for his rifle. Paul and Ortiz likewise armed themselves, taking positions around the clearing. Aurora retrieved her revolver but refused to hide. "This is my mine. I won't cower while others defend it." Before the men could argue, 5 riders burst into the clearing. Aurora's heart sank as she recognized Victor Blackwell at their head. The gang leader reined his horse to a stop, his cold eyes taking in the scene: the pile of ore, the work at the mine entrance, and the 4 people standing ready to defend it. "Well, well," Blackwell drawled. "Looks like someone's been busy, playing at being miners, are we?" "This is private property, Blackwell," Aurora called, her voice steadier than she felt. "You're trespassing." Blackwell's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Now that's where you're wrong, Miss James. This claim reverted to public domain when your father died." "I'm simply exercising my right to inspect an abandoned mine." "The Silver Queen is not abandoned," Aurora countered. "As you can clearly see, we're actively mining. The claim remains valid under my name." Blackwell dismounted, his men following suit. They spread out slightly, their hands hovering near their weapons. Aurora noticed that Ortiz and the Johnsons had positioned themselves strategically around her, creating a protective formation. "Active mining requires more than a few rocks in a pile," Blackwell said dismissively. "The county mining office might be interested to know you're operating without proper safety measures or adequate personnel." "Our paperwork is in order," Aurora replied, "and our safety measures exceed legal requirements." Blackwell's expression hardened. "Let's stop playing games, Miss James. We both know your father stole this claim from me. I'm merely reclaiming what's rightfully mine." "That's a lie," Aurora said, anger flaring. "My father discovered this vein and registered the claim legally. You killed him to steal it." "Be careful with your accusations," Blackwell warned, his voice dropping dangerously. "Slander can be dangerous for a young woman's health." "Is threatening a lady the action of an honorable man?" Samuel Johnson asked loudly, his rifle still trained on Blackwell. The gang leader's eyes flicked to Samuel, then back to Aurora. "I'm merely offering friendly advice. Mining is a dangerous business. Accidents happen frequently, particularly when inexperienced women play at being mine operators." "Your concern is noted," Aurora said coldly. "Now please leave my property." For a tense moment, Aurora thought Blackwell might order his men to attack. They outnumbered Aurora's group, but a gunfight would mean casualties on both sides. Finally, Blackwell gave a cold smile. "We'll go. For now." His gaze swept over the mine. "But I'll be watching. One mistake, one failure to meet legal requirements, and I'll be filing a claim jumper complaint with the mining office." His eyes fixed on Aurora. "You can't keep this up forever, Miss James. Sooner or later you'll make a mistake, and I'll be waiting." With that, Blackwell and his men remounted and rode away, leaving a cloud of dust and tension in their wake. "That went better than expected," Paul Johnson remarked once they were out of earshot. "He's not giving up," Aurora said grimly. "He's just changing tactics." "We should double the watch tonight," Ortiz suggested. "Men like that, they strike when they think you are not prepared." They resumed work with renewed urgency, all too aware that Blackwell might return with more men or a different strategy. Aurora worried about Garrett, hoping he hadn't encountered Blackwell's men on the trail. Her concern proved unnecessary when, an hour later, Garrett rode into the clearing, leading a second horse laden with supplies. He took in the tense atmosphere immediately. "What happened?" he asked, dismounting swiftly. Aurora explained the confrontation with Blackwell while helping unload the supplies. Garrett's expression darkened as he listened. "He's getting desperate," Garrett observed when she'd finished. "The fact that we're making progress so quickly has him worried." "But he's right about one thing," Aurora admitted. "We need more men and better equipment to maintain a legal operation." Garrett's grim expression gave way to a small smile. "That's why I brought these." He pulled a stack of papers from his saddlebag. 3 experienced miners will arrive tomorrow. I've also arranged for a proper ore wagon to transport the processed silver to the assay office in town. Aurora stared at him in astonishment. How did you manage that? Word spreads quickly in a mining town, Garrett replied. Especially when the story involves a determined young woman standing up to Victor Blackwell. Turns out, quite a few people in Central City have grudges against Blackwell. They're not unhappy to see someone challenge him. So they're helping us to spite Blackwell, Aurora asked. That, Garrett agreed, and the promise of a share in a working silver mine. Never underestimate the power of potential profit. With renewed hope, they worked until darkness forced them to stop. The crusher was nearly operational, and they had extracted enough ore to prove active mining. If they could process it and get it to the assay office in the next few days, Aurora's claim would be secure. That evening, they gathered around the fire for a meal, the atmosphere notably more relaxed, despite the confrontation with Blackwell. The discovery of rich ore had boosted everyone's spirits, and Garrett's successful recruitment of additional workers promised further progress. As night fell, they established a more rigorous watch schedule. Aurora again insisted on taking a shift, and this time Garrett reluctantly agreed, pairing her with himself for the midnight watch. When her turn came, Aurora joined Garrett near the edge of the clearing. The night was clear, with a waning moon providing just enough light to see by. They walked a circuit around the mine buildings, checking for any signs of intruders. "You handled Blackwell well today," Garrett commented as they completed their round and settled on a fallen log with a good view of the approach trail. "I was terrified," Aurora admitted, "but I couldn't show it." "That's what courage is," Garrett said quietly. "Feeling the fear but doing what needs to be done anyway." Aurora smiled in the darkness. "My father used to say something similar." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the forest. Finally, Aurora asked a question that had been on her mind. "You never really told me why you decided to help me," she said. "You mentioned understanding what it's like to be judged unfairly, but there must be more to it than that." Garrett was quiet so long that Aurora thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and reflective. "After the war, I drifted west, working whatever jobs I could find. In '70, I ended up in a mining town in Nevada called Silver Springs. Got hired as a security guard for a small silver operation." He paused, and Aurora sensed he was choosing his words carefully. The mine was owned by a man named Harrison. Good man, fair employer. He had a daughter, Elizabeth, who helped run the business side of things, much like you do. Aurora heard the change in his tone when he spoke the woman's name, a softening that suggested deep feelings. "We became close," Garrett continued. "Planned to marry. But there was another man, Whitley, who owned a larger mine nearby. He wanted Harrison's claim and Elizabeth's hand. When he couldn't get either legitimately, he resorted to sabotage, intimidation." "Like Blackwell," Aurora murmured. Garrett nodded. "One night, there was a cave-in at the main shaft. Harrison was killed. I was badly injured trying to save him." His hand absently touched his side, where Aurora guessed an old wound lay hidden beneath his shirt. "By the time I recovered, Whitley had convinced the town that I'd caused the collapse through negligence, that I'd been drinking on the job." "That's terrible," Aurora said softly. "What about Elizabeth? Didn't she defend you?" Garrett's silence told Aurora all she needed to know. She believed Whitley's lies, she realized aloud. She was grieving her father, Garrett said, though Aurora heard the old pain in his voice. Whitley was persuasive, respected in the community. "And I was just a drifter with no roots, no family to vouch for me." "So you left," Aurora guessed, had no choice, was lucky to avoid prison. He turned to look at her, his face half illuminated by moonlight. When I saw you in that saloon, standing up to those miners, I saw someone fighting the same battle I lost. Someone being judged for who they were, not what they could do. Aurora felt a deep connection to this man who had suffered such injustice, yet still retained enough faith to help her fight her own battles. "I'm sorry for what happened to you," she said sincerely, "and grateful that it brought you here." Their eyes held for a long moment, and Aurora felt something shift between them, a deeper understanding, perhaps, or the beginning of something more. The moment was broken by a distant sound, the snap of a twig in the forest. Garrett was instantly alert, rifle raised. "Stay here," he whispered, moving silently toward the sound. Aurora drew her revolver, heart pounding as she strained to see into the darkness. Minutes passed with excruciating slowness before Garrett returned. "Just a deer," he reported, though he didn't fully relax. "But we should remain vigilant. Blackwell isn't the type to give up easily." The remainder of their watch passed uneventfully, but Aurora's mind kept returning to Garrett's story. She understood now why he had come to her aid so readily, why he seemed to anticipate Blackwell's tactics. He had lived through a similar nightmare and recognized the patterns. When their shift ended and they woke the Johnson brothers for the next watch, Aurora found herself reluctant to return to her solitary quarters. There was something comforting about Garrett's presence, a steadiness that made her feel secure despite the dangers they faced. As they reached her door, Aurora impulsively touched Garrett's arm. "Thank you for trusting me with your story." He looked down at her hand on his arm, then met her eyes. "Thank you for listening." For a breathless moment, Aurora thought he might say more, or perhaps even kiss her. But he simply tipped his hat and withdrew, leaving her with a curious mixture of disappointment and anticipation. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. The additional miners Garrett had recruited arrived as promised, bringing the workforce to 7 men plus Aurora and Garrett. With more hands, progress accelerated dramatically. The crusher was made operational, allowing them to begin processing the silver ore. The mine tunnels were cleared further, providing access to more of the rich veins her father had discovered. Aurora divided her time between administrative duties and working alongside the men. She insisted on learning every aspect of the operation, from drilling techniques to ore processing. The miners' initial skepticism gradually gave way to respect as they witnessed her determination and growing expertise. Garrett seemed to be everywhere at once, organizing work crews, maintaining security, advising on mining techniques, and keeping Aurora informed of developments in town. He'd established a network of informants who kept watch on Blackwell's activities, giving them advance warning of potential threats. One afternoon, a week after they had begun work on the mine, Aurora was in the office reviewing the latest assay reports when Garrett entered, his expression unusually excited. "The first shipment of processed ore arrived at the assay office this morning," he announced. "The silver content is even higher than we estimated, over 80% in some samples." Aurora felt a surge of triumph. "That's extraordinary. Have you told the men?" "Just did. They're celebrating as we speak." Garrett's smile was genuine, lighting up his normally serious features. "You should join them. This is your victory more than anyone's." Aurora returned his smile, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun streaming through the window. Over the past week, her admiration for Garrett had deepened into something more complex. His quiet competence, his unwavering support, and the rare moments when he revealed glimpses of the man beneath the stoic exterior had combined to create feelings she hadn't expected to develop. "It's our victory," she corrected him. "Without you, I'd never have gotten this far." "You underestimate yourself, Aurora," he said quietly. It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice sent an unexpected thrill through her. Before she could respond, they were interrupted by Samuel Johnson calling from outside. "Riders coming." Looks like the sheriff, Aurora, and Garrett exchanged alarmed glances before hurrying outside. Sure enough, Sheriff Miller was approaching, accompanied by 2 deputies and, to Aurora's dismay, Victor Blackwell. "What now?" she muttered as they waited for the riders to reach them. "Stay calm," Garrett advised. "Let's hear what they have to say before reacting." The sheriff, a heavy-set man with a gray mustache and perpetually tired eyes, dismounted with a grunt. He nodded curtly to Aurora and Garrett. "Miss James, Hayes." His gaze swept over the bustling mining operation. "Looks like you've been busy." "We have, Sheriff," Aurora replied evenly. "The Silver Queen is fully operational again." Blackwell remained mounted, a smug smile playing on his lips. Aurora felt a chill of foreboding. "That's what I've come to discuss," Sheriff Miller said. "Mr. Blackwell here has filed a formal complaint alleging claim jumping and illegal mining operations." "That's absurd," Aurora protested. "This claim has been in my family since my father first registered it. We've maintained continuous operation since his death, and all our paperwork is in order." "May I see your mining permit?" the sheriff asked. Aurora hesitated. "It's in my father's name, but as his sole heir, the claim transfers to me. I have the deed and the succession paperwork." "A mining permit is non-transferable without proper documentation and approval from the county mining office," Blackwell interjected smoothly. "According to the law, you're operating illegally." Aurora glanced at Garrett, who stepped forward. "Sheriff, Miss James has filed all the necessary paperwork for transfer of ownership. The delay has been with the county office, not with Miss James." "That may be," the sheriff acknowledged, "but until the transfer is officially approved, technically Mr. Blackwell is correct." Aurora felt a surge of helpless anger. This was clearly another of Blackwell's tactics, using legal technicalities to obstruct her progress. "What does this mean for our operation?" she asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I'm afraid I'll have to issue a cease and desist order until the permit situation is resolved," the sheriff said, at least having the grace to look uncomfortable about it. "You can continue maintenance activities, but no extraction or processing of ore." "That could take weeks," Aurora exclaimed. "And without active mining, my claim could be declared abandoned." "Which is precisely the point," Garrett said quietly, his eyes fixed on Blackwell. The gang leader's smile widened. "Just upholding the law, Hayes, something you should appreciate being a former lawman yourself." Aurora glanced at Garrett in surprise. This was a part of his past he hadn't shared with her. "I still believe in justice, Blackwell," Garrett replied evenly. "Something you wouldn't recognize if it put a bullet in you." The sheriff cleared his throat awkwardly. "Now, gentlemen, let's keep this civil. Miss James, I'm afraid my hands are tied in this matter. The cease and desist order stands until the permit issue is resolved." He handed Aurora an official-looking document, then tipped his hat. "I'll give you till tomorrow to shut down operations. After that, I'll have to take further action if you're still extracting ore." With that, the sheriff and his deputies turned their horses and departed. Blackwell lingered, his cold gaze moving from Aurora to Garrett and back again. "You're beaten, Miss James," he said softly. "You just don't know it yet. Save yourself further grief and sell me the claim now. I'm still willing to offer a fair price. I'd rather see the Silver Queen collapse into the mountain than sell it to my father's murderer," Aurora replied, her voice shaking with suppressed rage. Blackwell's expression hardened. "Be careful what you wish for, Miss James." He wheeled his horse around and galloped after the sheriff, leaving Aurora and Garrett standing in a cloud of dust. The miners had gathered around, having witnessed the confrontation. Their faces showed various degrees of concern and anger. "What do we do now, Miss James?" Ortiz asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. Aurora looked at the cease and desist order in her hand, then at the faces of the men who had worked so hard to revive the Silver Queen. Finally, her gaze met Garrett's, finding in his steady green eyes the strength she needed. "We fight," she declared. "Blackwell thinks he's won, but he's underestimated us." "How do we fight the law?" Paul Johnson asked practically. "We use the law," Garrett answered. "Aurora has filed the proper transfer paperwork. We need to get it processed immediately." "The county office is in Denver," Aurora pointed out. "It would take days to get there and back, and even then, there's no guarantee they'll expedite the process." Garrett considered this. "What about Judge Wilson in Central City? He has the authority to issue a temporary operating permit pending the county's approval." Aurora's spirits lifted slightly. "Judge Wilson knew my father. He might be sympathetic to our situation." "I'll ride to town immediately," Garrett decided. "If I push hard, I can be back by morning with an answer one way or another." As Garrett prepared to leave, Aurora walked with him to the edge of the clearing. The other miners tactfully gave them privacy, returning to their tasks with deliberate focus. "Be careful," Aurora said. "Blackwell will be watching for any countermove we make." "I know his type," Garrett replied grimly. "Men like him believe everyone has a price or a breaking point. He hasn't found yours yet, which makes him dangerous." Aurora nodded, fear and determination warring within her. "What if Judge Wilson refuses to help?" Garrett's expression softened slightly. "Then we'll find another way. I didn't come this far to watch Blackwell win through legal trickery." Impulsively, Aurora reached out and squeezed his hand. "Come back safely." His fingers briefly tightened around hers. "I will." As Aurora watched him ride away, she was struck by how essential he had become to her in such a short time, not just for his skills or protection, but for his unwavering belief in her. In a world that constantly told her what she couldn't do, Garrett Hayes simply helped her do it anyway. She turned back to the mine, her resolve strengthened. Blackwell might have won this skirmish, but the battle for the Silver Queen was far from over. The afternoon and evening passed with tense anticipation. Aurora kept the men working on maintenance and preparation rather than ore extraction, complying with the letter if not the spirit of the cease and desist order. She instructed them to focus on reinforcing tunnels, repairing equipment, and organizing the ore they had already extracted. After dinner, Aurora gathered the miners to explain their situation fully and offer them a choice. "I understand if any of you wish to leave," she concluded. "This fight with Blackwell is becoming more dangerous, and I can't guarantee what will happen next. Those who stay will be paid as promised, but I won't think less of anyone who chooses to depart." The men exchanged glances. To Aurora's surprise and gratitude, it was Samuel Johnson who spoke first. "Miss James, I think I speak for all of us when I say we're not just here for the pay. We've worked for men like Blackwell before, men who think their money and influence put them above the law. It's a rare thing to find an employer who treats workers with respect and shares the profits fairly." Murmurs of agreement came from the other miners. Ortiz stepped forward. "My father lost his mind to men like Blackwell in Mexico," he said quietly. "I will not walk away and let it happen to you, señorita." Aurora felt a lump form in her throat. "Thank you," she managed. "All of you." That night, Aurora found sleep elusive. She lay awake, listening to the night sounds and worrying about Garrett. Had he reached town safely? Would Judge Wilson help them? What would they do if he refused? Dawn was just breaking when Aurora heard the sound of approaching hoofbeats. She hurried outside, heart pounding, to see Garrett riding into the clearing. His expression was grim, and he was not alone. 2 riders flanked him, and Aurora recognized one as Deputy Marshal Fletcher from the Territorial Office. As they dismounted, Aurora approached anxiously. "Garrett." "What happened?" Garrett's face was drawn with fatigue, but his eyes held a determined light. "Judge Wilson is dead," Aurora gasped. "Dead? How?" "They're saying it was his heart," Garrett replied, though his tone suggested skepticism. "Conveniently, it happened right after I requested an audience with him. The timing is suspicious, to say the least." "My God," Aurora breathed. "Do you think Blackwell?" "I think Blackwell's influence reaches further than we realized," Garrett said grimly, "but we have another problem. Deputy Marshal Fletcher here has a warrant to inspect the mine for safety violations." The deputy stepped forward, looking uncomfortable. "Miss James, I'm just following orders. The Territorial Office received a complaint about unsafe conditions at the Silver Queen." "From Blackwell, no doubt," Aurora said bitterly. "The complaint was anonymous," Fletcher replied, not meeting her eyes, "but I'm required to conduct a thorough inspection." "Of course you are," Aurora said, not bothering to hide her sarcasm. "By all means, inspect away. You'll find the Silver Queen exceeds safety requirements in every respect." The inspection took most of the morning. Deputy Fletcher was meticulous, checking support timbers, air quality, emergency exits, and a dozen other aspects of the operation. To Aurora's relief, he seemed to be conducting a genuine assessment rather than looking for excuses to shut them down. By midday, Fletcher had completed his inspection and was filling out his report at the mine office desk. Aurora and Garrett waited tensely for his verdict. "Well, Miss James," Fletcher said finally, "I have to say your operation is one of the most well-maintained I've seen. I can find no safety violations that would warrant closure." Aurora felt a surge of relief. "Thank you, Deputy. We take safety very seriously here." Fletcher nodded, but his expression remained troubled. "The problem is, I still have to enforce the cease and desist order until your permit situation is resolved. Without Judge Wilson to issue a temporary permit, you're in a difficult position." "How long will it take to get a response from the county office in Denver?" Garrett asked. "Normally, 2 to 3 weeks." Fletcher hesitated. "But there's a rumor that someone has filed an objection to Miss James's transfer application, which could delay it even further." "Blackwell," Garrett muttered. Fletcher didn't confirm or deny this but continued. "There is one option you might consider. The territorial governor is visiting Central City next week for the Founders' Day celebration. He has the authority to override county decisions in special circumstances." Aurora exchanged a glance with Garrett, hope kindling within her. "Could we petition the governor directly?" "It's irregular," Fletcher admitted, "but possible. You would need compelling evidence of harassment and obstruction." "We have that," Garrett said firmly. "And witnesses willing to testify." Fletcher rose, gathering his papers. "I can't officially advise you in this matter, but—" He lowered his voice. "Governor Pitkin is known to have no love for men like Blackwell. He's made cleaning up corruption in the mining industry a priority of his administration." With that cryptic advice, Fletcher departed, leaving Aurora and Garrett with a new potential avenue of action, but only a week to prepare their case. "You think the governor will help us?" Aurora asked once they were alone. "It's possible," Garrett replied thoughtfully. "Pitkin has been pushing for mining reforms. Our situation might interest him, especially if we can demonstrate Blackwell's corruption. But how do we get an audience with the governor?" "He'll be surrounded by local officials and businessmen during his visit." Garrett smiled unexpectedly. "As it happens, I served under Frederick Pitkin during the war. He was a captain when I was a young private. It's been many years, but he might remember me. Aurora's spirits lifted. Garrett, that's wonderful news, but what do we do until then? The cease and desist order prevents us from mining. We prepare, Garrett said decisively. We gather evidence against Blackwell, secure affidavits from witnesses, and make this mine so impressive that even a governor can't help but be swayed. The next few days were a flurry of activity. While maintaining the appearance of complying with the cease and desist order, they worked tirelessly to strengthen their position. Aurora drafted a formal petition to the governor, outlining the history of the Silver Queen, her father's murder, and Blackwell's campaign of intimidation and obstruction. Garrett rode into town daily, gathering affidavits from townspeople willing to testify about Blackwell's underhanded tactics. Not everyone was brave enough to stand against the powerful mine owner, but enough had suffered from his methods that a compelling case began to emerge. The miners continued improving the mine, making it a showcase of proper mining techniques and safety measures. If the governor was to inspect it, Aurora wanted him to see not just a functioning silver mine but an exemplary one. Throughout this intense period, Aurora found herself drawing closer to Garrett. They worked side by side, planning strategy, drafting documents, and preparing for their meeting with the governor. Their shared purpose created an intimacy that transcended their professional relationship. One evening, as they sat in the mine office reviewing their petition, Aurora found herself watching Garrett as he pored over a document. The lamplight cast his features in warm gold, softening the lines of concentration on his face. She was struck by how natural it felt to be working with him this way, as partners in a common cause. "You think we have a chance?" she asked softly. Garrett looked up, his green eyes meeting hers across the desk. "I believe we do. Blackwell has made enemies throughout the territory. The governor will recognize the pattern of corruption. And if we succeed, what then?" Garrett hesitated, a question in his eyes that went beyond their immediate situation. "What do you want to happen, Aurora?" The way he said her name made her heart beat faster. "I want to honor my father's legacy by making the Silver Queen the success he envisioned," she replied. Then, more hesitantly, "But I've realized there are other things I want too." Garrett set down the paper he'd been reading. "What things?" Aurora gathered her courage. "A partner. Someone who sees me as an equal. Someone who understands that a woman can be both strong and feminine, both a mine owner and—" She faltered, then continued more softly, "and a woman who cares deeply for a man who respects her." The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Then Garrett rose from his chair and came around the desk to where she sat. He knelt beside her, taking her hands in his. "Aurora," he said, his voice husky with emotion, "since the moment I saw you in that saloon, standing tall against men who underestimated you, I've admired your courage. Working beside you these past weeks, I've come to admire so much more your intelligence, your determination, your compassion for others." He raised one hand to gently touch her cheek. "I didn't expect to find someone like you. After Elizabeth, I thought that part of my life was over." Aurora turned her face into his palm, her heart racing. "And now I find myself hoping for things I'd given up on," he admitted. "A future, a home, someone to share both with." Aurora felt tears prick at her eyes. "I want those things too, Garrett." He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to withdraw if she wished. Instead, Aurora closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that began tentatively but quickly deepened with shared longing. When they finally parted, both breathless, Garrett rested his forehead against hers. "We should focus on saving your mine," he murmured, though he made no move to release her. Aurora smiled, feeling a happiness that transcended their difficult circumstances. "Our mine," she corrected him. Whatever happens with the governor, we're in this together now. He kissed her again, more briefly this time. Together, he agreed. The night before the governor's arrival in Central City, Garrett rode to town one last time to confirm the arrangements for their meeting. Aurora remained at the mine, finalizing their presentation and ensuring everything was in perfect order should the governor decide to visit the Silver Queen. She was in the mine office when she heard a commotion outside. Hurrying to the door, she found Samuel Johnson running toward her, his face urgent. "Miss James, riders coming, at least a dozen men, Blackwell's gang by the looks of them." Aurora felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. "Are you certain it's Blackwell?" "Can't see him among them, but they're armed and coming fast." Aurora made a quick decision. "Get everyone into defensive positions. We're not abandoning the mine." The miners scrambled to take up arms and find cover. Aurora retrieved her father's Remington and positioned herself near the office window, which offered a good view of the approach trail. The riders thundered into the clearing, guns already drawn. To Aurora's surprise, Blackwell was indeed not among them. Instead, his foreman, a brutal man named Riker, led the group. "James," Riker bellowed, "come out and face justice." Aurora stepped onto the office porch, her revolver held firmly but not raised. "What justice, Riker? What crime have I committed?" "Murder," Riker spat. "Sheriff Miller was found dead this morning, shot in the back. Your man Hayes was seen leaving his office late last night." Aurora felt the blood drain from her face. "That's a lie. Garrett would never. We found the murder weapon with Hayes's initials engraved on it," Riker cut her off. "He's already been arrested. Blackwell is offering you one chance sign over the mine now, and he'll testify that Hayes acted alone. Refuse, and you'll hang beside him as a conspirator." Aurora's mind raced. She knew Garrett was innocent. This was clearly a setup designed to force her hand before the governor arrived. But if Garrett had been arrested, their plan was in serious jeopardy. "I need proof that Garrett has actually been arrested," she called back. "For all I know, you've ambushed him on the trail," Riker sneered. "See for yourself." He tossed something toward the porch. It landed with a soft thud in the dirt. Aurora cautiously moved to retrieve it, keeping her gun trained on Riker. It was Garrett's hat, the well-worn Stetson he always wore, now stained with what appeared to be blood. Fighting to maintain her composure, Aurora straightened. "This proves nothing except that you're capable of theft and intimidation." "Believe what you want," Riker shrugged. "Blackwell's offer stands until sundown. After that, he can't help you." "Get off my property," Aurora said, her voice hard with controlled fury. "The governor arrives tomorrow. He'll hear the truth about Blackwell and his methods." Riker's expression shifted to one of mock pity. "The governor's train was delayed. Won't arrive for another 3 days. By then, it'll be too late for you and Hayes." With that ominous warning, Riker and his men wheeled their horses and rode away, leaving Aurora clutching Garrett's blood-stained hat and fighting a rising sense of panic. As soon as the riders were out of sight, the miners gathered around her. "Is it true?" Ortiz asked. "Has Hayes been arrested?" "I don't know," Aurora admitted, her mind still reeling. "But I need to find out. Samuel, Paul, can you hold the mine if I go to town?" The Johnson brothers exchanged glances. "We'll defend it with our lives," Samuel promised. "But Miss James, if Hayes has been arrested for murder—" "He's innocent," Aurora said firmly. "This is Blackwell's doing, trying to force me to sign over the mine before the governor arrives." "It's a dangerous game," Paul warned. "If the sheriff really is dead, then someone killed him, but it wasn't Garrett," Aurora insisted. "I need to get to town and learn the truth." Despite the miners' concerns, Aurora was determined. She quickly changed into a proper dress if she was to advocate for Garrett. She would need to be taken seriously by the townspeople. She tucked her revolver into her pocket, mounted Willow, and set off for Central City with a single goal: to save the man she loved. The ride to town was tense, every shadow potentially concealing Blackwell's men. But Aurora encountered no one, and as she approached Central City, she was struck by the unusual activity. People were gathered in small groups along the main street, talking urgently. The atmosphere was one of shock and apprehension. Aurora rode directly to the sheriff's office, dismounting quickly and tying Willow to the hitching post. The office door was closed, but through the window, she could see several men inside, including Deputy Wilson, who had been promoted to acting sheriff. Taking a deep breath, Aurora pushed open the door and stepped inside. Conversation stopped abruptly as all eyes turned to her. "Miss James," Deputy Wilson acknowledged her, his expression unreadable. "I expected you might come." "Is it true?" Aurora demanded. "Is Sheriff Miller dead, and have you arrested Garrett Hayes for his murder?" Wilson nodded grimly. "Sheriff Miller was found shot in his office this morning. And yes, Hayes is in custody." "I need to see him," Aurora said firmly. "That's not possible right now," Wilson replied. "Hayes is being questioned." Aurora's eyes narrowed. "You mean he's being beaten into a confession?" "Now see here, Miss James," Wilson began, but Aurora cut him off. Sheriff Wilson, Garrett Hayes is innocent. This is a scheme by Victor Blackwell to force me to sell him my mine before the governor arrives." "That's a serious accusation," Wilson said, though Aurora noticed he didn't seem surprised. "It's the truth," she insisted. "Blackwell's foreman came to the mine and offered me a deal sign over the Silver Queen, and Blackwell would testify that Garrett acted alone. That's not the behavior of someone seeking justice. It's blackmail." The other men in the room shifted uncomfortably. One of them, whom Aurora recognized as the town banker, Mr. Peterson, cleared his throat. "The young lady may have a point, Wilson. Blackwell was mighty quick to produce that engraved pistol as evidence." Wilson frowned. "Evidence is evidence, Peterson." "And Hayes was seen leaving the sheriff's office shortly before the estimated time of death." "By whom?" Aurora challenged. "One of Blackwell's men, or someone Blackwell paid to lie." Before Wilson could respond, the office door opened, and Victor Blackwell himself entered, followed by two of his men. He stopped short at the sight of Aurora, then smiled thinly. "Miss James, I see news travels fast." "Not as fast as your schemes, Blackwell," Aurora replied coldly. "I know what you're doing, and it won't work. Garrett is innocent, and the governor will hear the truth when he arrives." Blackwell's smile didn't waver. "A tragic situation all around. Sheriff Miller was a good man. As for Hayes, well, men with violent pasts often return to their old ways." "What are you talking about?" Aurora demanded. "Didn't your paramour tell you?" Blackwell's voice dripped with false sympathy. "Hayes was discharged from the territorial marshals for excessive force. He killed 3 men during an arrest in Wyoming. Some say they were surrendering when he shot them." Aurora refused to be baited. "More lies, Blackwell. You'll say anything to discredit Garrett and pressure me into selling the mine." "Speaking of the mine," Blackwell continued smoothly, "my offer still stands. Sign over the claim to me, and I'll testify that Hayes acted without your knowledge or involvement. You could be on a train east by tomorrow, free to start a new life." "I'd rather hang beside an innocent man than sell my father's legacy to his murderer," Aurora declared, her voice ringing with conviction. The room fell silent at her words. Aurora saw something flicker in Wilson's eyes: doubt, perhaps, or a reluctant admiration. Blackwell's pleasant mask slipped momentarily, revealing the cold calculation beneath. "That can be arranged, Miss James." "Are you threatening her, Blackwell?" Wilson asked sharply. "In my office." Blackwell composed his features quickly. "Not at all, Sheriff. Simply expressing concern that Miss James is making a grave error in judgment." Aurora turned to Wilson, appealing directly to him. "Sheriff, I request permission to see Mr. Hayes. If he's to be accused of murder, he deserves to know that he has someone who believes in his innocence." Wilson hesitated, glancing between Aurora and Blackwell. Finally, he sighed. "5 minutes, Miss James, and I'll be present the entire time." "Wilson," Blackwell began to protest, but the acting sheriff cut him off. "My office, my rules, Blackwell. Miss James gets 5 minutes." Blackwell's eyes hardened, but he stepped aside as Wilson led Aurora to the cells at the back of the building. Aurora's heart pounded as they approached the last cell, where a figure sat on a narrow cot, head bowed. "Hayes," Wilson called. "You have a visitor." Garrett looked up and Aurora gasped at the sight of his face. His left eye was swollen shut, dried blood caked at the corner of his mouth, and a nasty bruise darkened his jaw. "Aurora," he said, rising quickly despite his obvious pain. "You shouldn't have come." "Of course I came," she replied, moving to the bars that separated them. "Garrett, I know you're innocent. Blackwell's behind this. His men came to the mine and tried to blackmail me into selling." Garrett's one good eye focused on Wilson. "You hear that, Sheriff? Blackwell's showing his hand." Wilson shifted uncomfortably. "5 minutes, Miss James," he reminded her, then stepped back to give them a semblance of privacy, though he remained within earshot. Garrett moved closer to the bars, lowering his voice. "Listen carefully. Blackwell's desperate. The governor isn't delayed. That's a lie they told you to pressure you into selling." "How do you know?" "Because I managed to send a telegram to Governor Pitkin before they arrested me. He'll be here tomorrow as planned. That's why Blackwell made his move now." Hope surged within Aurora. "Then we still have a chance. If I can speak to the governor." "You need to be careful," Garrett interrupted urgently. "Blackwell won't stop at framing me. He'll try to prevent you from reaching the governor." "The mine is secure," Aurora assured him. "The men are loyal. They'll defend it until I return." "It's not the mine I'm worried about," Garrett said, his voice rough with emotion. "It's you. Promise me you'll take precautions." Aurora reached through the bars to touch his bruised face gently. "I promise, but I won't leave Central City without you." "Aurora," he began, but she silenced him with a look. "We're in this together, remember? Whatever happens, we face it side by side." Garrett's expression softened and he turned his face into her hand. "Together," he agreed quietly. "Time's up," Wilson called, approaching the cell again. Aurora reluctantly withdrew her hand. "I'll be back, Garrett. The governor will hear the truth." As Wilson escorted her back to the main office, Aurora's mind raced with plans. If the governor was indeed arriving tomorrow, she needed to ensure she could speak with him before Blackwell interfered. In the front office, Blackwell was gone, but his presence lingered in the tense atmosphere. Aurora was about to leave when Wilson spoke unexpectedly. "Miss James, a word of advice." His voice was low, meant for her ears alone. "Be at the train station when the governor arrives. Don't try to see Hayes again before then, and watch your back." Startled, Aurora studied the acting sheriff's face. "Why are you helping me?" Wilson glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. "Miller had suspicions about your father's death. He was collecting evidence against Blackwell when he was killed." His eyes met hers. "I don't know if Hayes is innocent, but I know Blackwell is guilty of much worse." Aurora nodded, a new ally offering a glimmer of hope. "Thank you, Sheriff." Outside, Aurora found Central City transformed by news of the sheriff's murder. The streets were unusually quiet, with people hurrying about their business rather than lingering to socialize. She felt eyes watching her from windows and doorways as she made her way to the hotel. Rather than returning to the mine as she'd planned, Aurora decided to stay in town overnight. If the governor was arriving tomorrow, she needed to be present, and traveling the mountain trail in darkness was too risky with Blackwell's men potentially lying in wait. At the Central City Hotel, the desk clerk looked surprised to see her but provided a room without comment. Aurora asked for paper and ink, then sat down to write a message to the miners at the Silver Queen, explaining the situation and instructing them to maintain their vigilance. After arranging for the message to be delivered, Aurora tried to rest, but sleep eluded her. Her mind kept returning to Garrett, locked in that cell, beaten and falsely accused. She believed in his innocence completely, but would the governor, would the townspeople? And even if they did, would it be enough to save him from the hangman's noose? Dawn found her at the window, watching Central City come to life. The governor's train was scheduled to arrive at 10 o'clock, giving her several hours to prepare. Aurora dressed with care in her best gown, a deep blue that her father had said matched her eyes. She styled her hair simply but neatly, wanting to present the image of a respectable businesswoman rather than a desperate supplicant. At 9:30, Aurora made her way to the train station, which was already crowded with townspeople eager to glimpse the governor. She positioned herself near the platform, scanning the crowd for signs of Blackwell or his men. The territorial governor, Frederick Pitkin, arrived precisely on schedule, his train pulling into the station with a blast of steam and the screech of brakes. He emerged from his private car to enthusiastic applause, a distinguished man in his 50s, with a neatly trimmed beard and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to authority. Aurora watched as the town's dignitaries surged forward to greet him. Mayor Hollister was first, followed by prominent businessmen and, to her dismay, Victor Blackwell, resplendent in an expensive suit and wearing his most charming smile. She tried to push forward, but the crowd was too dense. Blackwell was already speaking earnestly to the governor, no doubt poisoning his mind against Garrett and herself. Frustration and fear threatened to overwhelm her as she saw her opportunity slipping away. Then, unexpectedly, she heard her name. "Is Miss Aurora James present?" The governor was asking, looking over the heads of the crowd. "I understand she has an urgent matter to discuss." Aurora raised her hand. "Here, Governor, I'm Aurora James." The crowd parted reluctantly, allowing her to approach the platform. Blackwell's smile had frozen on his face, his eyes hard with anger as she stepped forward. Governor Pitkin studied her with keen interest. "Miss James, I received a rather concerning telegram about you and a former soldier named Garrett Hayes." "Yes, Governor," Aurora confirmed, acutely aware of the hostile gaze Blackwell was directing at her. "I need to speak with you about a grave injustice both against Mr. Hayes and my late father." The governor nodded thoughtfully. "I see. Well, I had planned to refresh myself at the hotel before beginning official business, but this sounds most urgent." He turned to the mayor. "Hollister, is there somewhere Miss James and I could speak privately? And I'd like Acting Sheriff Wilson present as well." "Of course, Governor," Mayor Hollister replied, though he looked somewhat discomfited. "The Town Hall Council chamber is available." "Excellent." The governor offered Aurora his arm in a gallant gesture. "Miss James, shall we?" As they walked toward the town hall, Aurora was conscious of Blackwell following at a distance, his face dark with thwarted plans. The townspeople watched curiously, and Aurora lifted her chin, refusing to show fear or uncertainty. In the council chamber, with Sheriff Wilson present, and the door closed against eavesdroppers, Governor Pitkin came straight to the point. "Now, Miss James, I received a most unusual telegram from Mr. Hayes just before his arrest." He claimed that a prominent mine owner named Blackwell had murdered your father to steal a valuable silver claim and was now attempting to obstruct justice through legal machinations. That's correct, Governor, Aurora confirmed. Victor Blackwell murdered my father 3 months ago. When that failed to get him the Silver Queen mine, he began a campaign of intimidation and obstruction. These are serious allegations, the governor observed. What evidence do you have? Aurora produced the documents. She had prepared affidavits from witnesses who had seen Blackwell's men near the mine on the day of her father's murder, testimonies about threats Blackwell had made, and documentation of the suspicious delays in processing her transfer of ownership application. And now, she continued, Blackwell has framed Garrett Hayes for Sheriff Miller's murder, hoping to force me to sell the mine before you arrived. Governor Pitkin examined the documents carefully, occasionally asking Sheriff Wilson to confirm certain details. Finally, he sat back, his expression grave. This pattern of corruption is precisely what my administration has been fighting against in the mining territories, he said. But accusations of murder require substantial proof. Governor, Sheriff Wilson spoke up unexpectedly. Sheriff Miller left a sealed envelope in the office safe to be opened in the event of his death. I retrieved it this morning. He produced an envelope and handed it to the governor. It contains evidence he had collected against Blackwell, including testimony from a witness to James Sr.'s murder who was too afraid to come forward publicly. Aurora stared at Wilson in shock. This was the first she had heard of such evidence. The governor opened the envelope and read its contents, his expression darkening. "This is most disturbing," he murmured. "If these allegations are proven true, Blackwell has committed not only murder but corruption of public officials and perversion of justice." He looked up at Aurora, his decision made. "Miss James, I believe you have been gravely wronged. As territorial governor, I am issuing an executive order granting you temporary operational authority for the Silver Queen mine, pending proper transfer of ownership. Additionally, I am ordering the immediate release of Garrett Hayes and a full investigation into the murders of both your father and Sheriff Miller." Aurora felt tears of relief sting her eyes. "Thank you, Governor. Thank you for your justice." "Don't thank me yet," Pitkin cautioned. "Blackwell is a powerful man with many allies. This fight is far from over." As if summoned by his name, the door to the council chamber burst open and Blackwell stormed in, his face contorted with rage. "This is outrageous," he bellowed. "A private meeting to slander a respected businessman." "I demand to be heard, Mr. Blackwell," the governor said coldly. "You will be heard in court. Sheriff Wilson, place this man under arrest for the murders of Edward James and Sheriff Thomas Miller, as well as corruption of public officials and multiple counts of intimidation." Blackwell's face drained of color. "You can't do this. I have friends in Denver who—" "Your friends can't help you now," Governor Pitkin interrupted. "Sheriff, carry out your duty." Wilson moved to arrest Blackwell, but the mine owner's hand darted to his jacket, emerging with a small derringer. "Stay back," he shouted, his voice edged with desperation. "I'll kill her." He pointed the gun at Aurora. "I'll kill her just like I killed her father." Time seemed to slow as Aurora stared down the barrel of Blackwell's gun. In that moment, she saw not just her own death, but the end of everything she and Garrett had fought for. Then, with stunning swiftness, the window behind Blackwell shattered, and a bullet struck him in the shoulder. He screamed in pain, the derringer falling from his grasp as he collapsed to his knees. Aurora rushed to the window and saw Garrett in the street below, rifle in hand, surrounded by deputies who had apparently just released him from his cell. "Are you all right?" He called up to her, his face still bruised but his eyes bright with concern. "I'm fine," she called back, her heart overflowing with relief and love. "We did it, Garrett. The governor believes us." As Wilson and his deputies secured the wounded Blackwell, who was now confessing his crimes in a desperate attempt to save himself, Aurora ran from the council chamber and down the stairs to the street. Garrett met her at the bottom of the steps, dropping his rifle to catch her in his arms as she flung herself at him. They clung to each other, oblivious to the gathering crowd of curious onlookers. "I thought I'd lost you," Aurora whispered against his neck. "Never," Garrett replied, his arms tightening around her. "I promised we'd face everything together, remember?" Aurora drew back slightly to look at his battered face. "How did you get released?" "The governor sent word to Wilson as soon as he read those documents," Garrett explained. "When I heard the commotion and realized Blackwell had followed you into the town hall." "You saved my life," Aurora said softly. Garrett's hand came up to cradle her face. "You saved mine first." Their reunion was interrupted by Governor Pitkin, who approached with a smile that softened his dignified features. "Mr. Hayes," he greeted, extending his hand. "It's been many years, but I never forget a good soldier." Garrett shook the governor's hand respectfully. "Thank you for your intervention, sir." "No thanks necessary," Pitkin replied. "Justice was long overdue in this case." He turned to include Aurora in his gaze. "Miss James, I would very much like to see this silver mine that has caused so much trouble. Perhaps you and Mr. Hayes could provide a tour this afternoon." "We'd be honored, Governor," Aurora replied warmly. The next few hours passed in a whirlwind of activity. Blackwell was secured in the jail, his wound treated by the town doctor. His full confession, given in the hope of leniency, implicated several of his men in both murders and revealed the extent of his corruption throughout the county. By mid-afternoon, Aurora and Garrett were leading Governor Pitkin and his small entourage up the trail to the Silver Queen. The miners greeted them jubilantly, having received word of Blackwell's arrest and the governor's intervention. The tour of the mine impressed Pitkin visibly. He commented frequently on the quality of the ore, the safety measures in place, and the efficient operation Aurora had established. "You've created something remarkable here, Miss James," he told her as they stood at the entrance to the main shaft, watching the miners demonstrate the extraction process. "Your father would be proud." "Thank you, Governor," Aurora replied, emotion thickening her voice. "That means more than I can express." "What are your plans now?" Pitkin asked. With Blackwell's interference removed, the Silver Queen could become one of the most productive mines in the territory. Aurora glanced at Garrett, who stood nearby, discussing technical details with Ortiz. "We have many plans for expansion," she said. "But first, we need to ensure the mine is officially and permanently secured in my name." "Consider it done," the governor assured her. "I'll have my staff expedite the paperwork." By the end of the week, the Silver Queen will be legally yours, with no possibility of further challenges. After the governor and his party departed, promising further support and investment in the region, Aurora found herself alone with Garrett on the porch of the mine office. The setting sun bathed the clearing in golden light, giving everything a dreamlike quality after the intense drama of the day. "I can hardly believe it's over," Aurora said, watching the miners preparing the evening meal, their mood festive and relaxed. "Blackwell will face justice. The mine is secure. It feels almost too good to be true." Garrett took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "You earned this victory, Aurora. Your courage, your determination, you never gave up, even when it seemed hopeless." "We earned it," she corrected him. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." Garrett's expression grew serious. There's something I need to ask you, something I've been thinking about since before all this happened with Blackwell and the sheriff." Aurora's heart quickened at his tone. "What is it?" "When the governor asked about your plans, you said we. Did you mean that? Is there still a place for me here now that the danger has passed?" Aurora turned to face him fully, taking both his hands in hers. "Garrett Hayes, there will always be a place for you here. Not just at the Silver Queen, but—" She placed one of his hands over her heart. "Here, if you want it." Garrett's eyes, green as the pine forests that surrounded them, held hers with an intensity that took her breath away. "I want it more than I've ever wanted anything," he said softly. "I love you, Aurora James. I think I've loved you since you stood in that saloon and declared they'd never respect you." Aurora smiled, tears of joy brightening her eyes. "And you said they would when they saw me ride beside you." "They do now," Garrett observed, glancing toward the miners who had indeed come to respect Aurora not just as their employer but as a woman of exceptional courage and ability. "Yes," Aurora agreed, "but the only respect that truly matters to me is yours." "Respect doesn't begin to describe what I feel for you," Garrett said, drawing her closer. "Admiration, pride, love." "Then stay," Aurora whispered. "Be my partner in the mine, in life, in everything." Instead of answering with words, Garrett lowered his mouth to hers in a kiss that held all the promise of their shared future, tender yet passionate. A perfect balance of strength and gentleness, just like the man himself. When they finally parted, Garrett rested his forehead against hers, their breath mingling in the cooling evening air. "Is that a yes?" Aurora asked, her voice unsteady with emotion. Garrett smiled, the first truly carefree smile she had seen from him. "That's a yes to everything, partner, husband, whatever you need me to be." "Just be you," Aurora told him. "That's all I've ever wanted." 1 year later, the Silver Queen mine was the most productive silver operation in central Colorado. Under Aurora and Garrett's joint management, it had expanded to employ over 50 miners, with modern equipment and exemplary safety standards that were becoming a model for the industry. Victor Blackwell had been convicted of murder and corruption, sentenced to life imprisonment in the territorial penitentiary. His criminal empire had crumbled, allowing smaller mine owners to operate without fear of intimidation or sabotage. On a perfect autumn day, with aspen leaves turning gold on the mountainsides, Aurora stood on the porch of the newly built house overlooking the mine. The substantial 2-story home, with its wide verandas and large windows, was a testament to the Silver Queen's success. But more importantly, it was the home she shared with Garrett, who had become her husband in a simple ceremony performed by Governor Pitkin himself 6 months earlier. Aurora's hand rested on her slightly rounded stomach, where their first child grew a new generation to carry on the legacy of the Silver Queen. She smiled as she saw Garrett approaching from the mine office, his stride purposeful yet relaxed in a way it hadn't been when they first met. The haunted look that had once shadowed his eyes had long since been replaced by contentment and pride in what they had built together. "Daydreaming again, Mrs. Hayes?" he asked as he joined her on the porch, placing a gentle kiss on her temple. "Remembering," Aurora corrected him. "Thinking about how far we've come." Garrett's hand covered hers where it rested on her stomach. "We've come far," he agreed, "but the best is yet to come." From the mine below came the sounds of men working, calling to each other, the rhythmic thud of hammers and the rumble of ore carts. What had once seemed an impossible dream was now a thriving reality. "You ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't been in that saloon that day?" Aurora asked. "If you hadn't spoken up when I said they'd never respect me?" Garrett considered this for a moment. "I believe some things are meant to be, Aurora. Perhaps we would have found each other through a different path, but I'm grateful it happened as it did." Aurora leaned into his embrace, feeling the strength and tenderness that had become her sanctuary. "As am I. Every struggle, every moment of fear, I would face it all again to be where we are now." "Together," Garrett murmured, the word that had become their promise to each other. "Together," Aurora echoed, lifting her face for his kiss as the golden light of afternoon bathed the Silver Queen in radiance, a fitting crown for all they had overcome and all that awaited them in their shared future.